In 2023, Fidelity published a number that almost nobody covered. The average retirement account balance for investors in their 30s was $23,000. Not because those people weren't saving, because they were doing everything the chart told them to do, and still feeling like nothing was happening. You've seen the chart. Small amount in, time does the work, the line bends upward into something that looks almost unreasonable. The promise is clean. Start early, stay consistent, let compounding handle the rest. So you open the account, you set up the contributions, you check the balance 3 months later, and it looked almost identical to the month before. Here's what the chart never shows you. Two forces are working against your portfolio the entire time it's supposed to be growing. One is hiding inside the fine print of every fund you own. The other is built into the economy itself. Together, they don't just slow compounding down. They quietly raise the bar for when it actually starts working. That gap between the promise and what you're actually seeing, that's not a patience problem. It's a mechanics problem. And that's what this video is about. If you keep optimizing without understanding what's draining your progress, the math will keep feeling broken, even when you're doing everything right. My name is Alex, and if you've ever felt like your investment account should be further along by now, stay with me, because the return rate is not your biggest obstacle, and I'm going to show you exactly where compounding breaks down before it takes off, and what it actually costs you when those two silent forces go unaddressed. Once you understand this, you won't just save differently. You'll know precisely what you're building toward, and why the number on your screen is probably not the number that matters. And it starts with something most investors never consider, that compounding has a size problem. Here is something worth sitting with for a moment. The mathematics of compounding is not a theory. It has been verified across every major market, every time period, every asset class studied. The mechanism is real. And yet, for most people in the first several years of investing, it produces almost nothing they can feel. That gap between what is real and what is visible is the whole problem. Compound interest has a size problem, not a time problem, not a patience problem, a size problem. Below a certain amount of money, the compounding effect is so small that it is effectively invisible. The growth is happening. The math is correct, but the numbers are too tiny to register as meaningful. And that disconnect between doing the right thing and feeling nothing is exactly why so many people quietly start to wonder if any of this is actually working. Here is how it plays out in practice. Say you have $5,000 invested. You earn 8% for the year. That is $400 of growth. For 12 months of discipline, you added roughly $33 a month to your balance. Your account barely moved. The math worked perfectly. The result felt like nothing. Now run the same 8% on $50,000. That is $4,000 in a single year. $333 a month without you doing anything. You can feel that. It starts to look like progress. That difference is not about the return rate. It is entirely about the base. Let me make this concrete. Take someone in their early 30s, a project manager in Dallas, putting away $200 a month, earning a consistent 8% annual return. After 10 years, she has saved $24,000 of her own money. Her account is worth around $36,000. The market added $12,000 over a decade. That is real money. But spread across 10 years, it averages out to about $100 a month in growth. On top of her $200, she is doing everything right, and her account is growing by $300 a month. That does not feel like a rocket ship. It feels like a savings account with a small bonus. Now change one variable, same return, same 10 years. But instead of $200 a month, she finds a way to invest $400. Her final balance is around $73,000. She contributed $48,000. The market added $25,000. Still not life-changing, but the engine is getting bigger, and that matters enormously for what comes next. Push it one more time. $400 becomes $600 a month. Same 8%, same decade. Now she's sitting at just under $110,000. She contributed $72,000. The market added $38,000. And here is where something shifts. That $38,000 in market growth is now larger than a full year of her contributions. The balance has reached a size where the returns are starting to pull their own weight. The interest rate never changed. The timeline never changed. The only variable was how much went in each month. And the outcome moved from modest to genuinely meaningful. This is the part that most financial content glosses over. Everyone talks about the magic of compounding as if the mechanism alone does the work. It does not at first. In the early years, compounding is almost entirely dependent on the size of what you are compounding. You are not waiting for time to work. You are waiting for your balance to cross a threshold where the returns become large enough to feel like a second income rather than a rounding error. And the fastest way to reach that threshold is not to find a better investment. It is to feed the engine harder than you currently are. That insight changes how you think about every financial decision in your 30s. Because once you see it clearly, the question is no longer where to invest. The question is how to become a more powerful engine. And that is exactly what phase one is about. The period where you are the engine, and everything depends on how much fuel you can generate. There is a moment in every long-term investor's journey that nobody warns you about, not because it is bad, because it is quietly stunning, and it happens without announcement. One year, you check your balance and realize the market added more to your account than you did. Your contributions did not shrink. Your income did not change. The balance just got large enough that the returns started outrunning the deposits. That is the moment phase two begins. And once it starts, the whole game changes. The dividing line between phase one and phase two is not a date on the calendar. It is a number, approximately $100,000. Now, that is not a magical figure carved into financial law somewhere. It is a threshold, the point at which an 8% annual return starts generating enough money each year to feel like a meaningful second contribution. At $100,000, 8% is $8,000 a year. That is $667 a month, landing in your account without you doing anything. Your portfolio is now producing the equivalent of a part-time paycheck, purely from its own size. Below that number, returns feel like rounding errors. Above it, they start to feel like momentum. And the shift is not gradual. It is a flip. In the early years of investing, when your balance is small, you are doing the majority of the work. Studies of long-term portfolio growth consistently show that in the first decade, contributions account for roughly 80% of total account growth. The market is helping, but you are the engine. Most of what you see in your balance is money you put there yourself. Cross the threshold, stay invested, and the dynamic reverses. In the later years, market returns account for roughly 77% of total growth. You are still contributing, but your contributions are no longer the dominant force. The balance itself has taken over. The snowball is rolling, and it is picking up mass faster than you can add to it manually. Let me show you what this looks like with real numbers. Take someone like Jordan, a logistics manager in Nashville, who starts investing at 28. He contributes $400 a month into a diversified index portfolio, earning 8% annually. For the first several years, his balance climbs steadily, but unspectacularly. At the 5-year mark, he has around $29,000, still clearly in phase one, still doing most of the work himself. By year 10, he is approaching $73,000. Getting closer. The returns are becoming more visible, but contributions are still carrying most of the weight. Then, somewhere around year 12, he crosses $100,000. And from that point forward, the numbers start behaving differently. By year 15, his balance is around $138,000. The market added roughly $30,000 in just those 3 years. That is $10,000 a year in growth from returns alone, more than double what he is contributing monthly. By year 20, he's approaching $220,000. His contributions over that second decade added around $48,000. The market added roughly $74,000. He is no longer the biggest contributor to his own account. That is the snowball, and it is worth being specific about why it accelerates the way it does. Each year's returns get added to a larger base, which generates larger returns the following year, which get added to an even larger base. It is not a straight line. It is a curve that keeps bending more steeply. The math does not change, the base does. And a larger base means every percentage point of return represents more actual dollars than it did the year before. This is why the advice to start early is correct but incomplete. Starting early matters, but starting early and contributing enough to reach the threshold quickly matters far more. Time without sufficient balance is just waiting. The threshold is the real target, which brings up a question most people never think to ask. If $100,000 is the threshold, and the goal is to reach it as fast as possible, what is quietly working against you while you are trying to get there? Because the return rate is not the only number in the equation, and that is where the silent drains come in. Nobody sits down and decides to let fees and inflation quietly dismantle their compounding. It happens because both forces are almost perfectly designed to go unnoticed. Fees are expressed as a small percentage, so they feel trivial. Inflation is reported as an annual headline number, so it feels abstract. But when you put them together inside a compounding portfolio over 30 years, the effect is not trivial, and it is not abstract. It is the difference between the retirement you calculated and the one you actually get. Start with fees. The average actively managed mutual fund in the United States currently carries an expense ratio of around 0.6 to 1% annually. Some are higher. Many people own funds charging 1.2 or 1.5% without realizing it, because the fee is never deducted as a visible line item. It just quietly reduces the return the fund reports to you. You never see it leave. You just see slightly less growth than you should have had. 1% sounds like almost nothing. Here's what it actually costs. Take someone like Priya, a marketing director in Chicago, investing $400 a month over 30 years at a gross return of 8%. In a low-cost index fund, charging 0.05%, which is roughly what a standard S&P 500 index fund charges today. Her final balance is approximately $589,000. Now put her in an actively managed fund charging 1.1% annually. Same contributions, same gross return, same 30 years. Her final balance drops to around $430,000. The fee did not cost her 1%. It cost her $159,000. That is 27% of her ending balance, gone entirely to fund expenses. And here's the part that makes it worse. That $159,000 was not just money she paid out of pocket. It was money that would have compounded. Every dollar consumed by fees in year 5 was a dollar that could not generate returns in years 6 through 30. Fees do not just reduce your balance. They reduce the base that compounding works on. They steal from the snowball. Now, layer inflation on top of that. The long-run average inflation rate in the United States sits around 3% annually. As of early 2026, it has been running slightly above that. And what this means for your portfolio is straightforward, but easy to ignore. Your balance grows in nominal terms, the number on the screen, but your purchasing power grows in real terms, what that number can actually buy. And those two things are not the same. A portfolio worth $500,000 in 30 years sounds substantial, but at 3% annual inflation, $500,000 30 years from now has the purchasing power of roughly $206,000 in today's money. The account did not shrink. Everything else got more expensive. Same result. This is why the $100,000 threshold, while useful, is not the complete picture. In real terms, accounting for inflation. The threshold you actually need to reach before compounding starts doing heavy lifting is closer to $150,000 to $160,000 in today's purchasing power. The nominal number looks fine. The real number tells a different story. Put fees and inflation together and the gap becomes harder to ignore. An investor losing 1% annually to fees, investing in an environment of 3% inflation, needs their gross return to clear 4% just to break even in real terms. At 8% gross, their real net return after fees and inflation is closer to 3.9%, not 8, not even close to 8. The number that matters is less than half the number that gets advertised. None of this means compounding is broken. It means the target is higher than the charts suggest, and reaching it requires being deliberate about costs in a way most investors simply are not, which is exactly why the strategy for Phase 1 is not complicated, but it is specific. Getting to the real threshold faster means making 3 decisions correctly and consistently. That is what the strategy comes down to. Most financial strategies fail not because they are wrong, but because they are too complicated to execute consistently. Too many variables, too many decisions, too many moments where willpower is supposed to substitute for structure. What actually works in Phase 1 is almost aggressively simple. 3 decisions, made once, applied repeatedly. The goal is singular. Reach the real threshold as fast as possible. Everything else is noise. The first decision is automation. This one sounds obvious, which is probably why most people underestimate how much it matters. When contributions are manual, they compete with every other financial priority in a given month. A car repair shows up. A work trip needs covering. A subscription renews unexpectedly. And the investment contribution, which feels the most optional in the moment, is the one that quietly gets skipped. Once, then twice, then occasionally, then rarely. Automating contributions removes the decision entirely. The money moves on payday, before it touches your checking account, before it gets mentally allocated to anything else. It is not willpower, it is architecture. And the behavioral research on this is consistent. Automated investors contribute more regularly, and are significantly less likely to stop during market downturns than those who invest manually. In 2025, Vanguard published data showing that participants in automatic enrollment retirement plans had median balances roughly 40% higher than those who enrolled manually, even after controlling for income and age. The investment was identical. The behavior was not. Set the amount, set the date. Do not touch it. The second decision is the raise rule. The average U.S. worker receives a salary increase of around 3 to 4% annually. Some years more, some years less. The problem is not the raise. The problem is what happens to it. Within 60 to 90 days of receiving a pay increase, most people have fully absorbed it into their spending without a single deliberate decision. Lifestyle expands to meet available income almost automatically. The raise disappears and the contribution rate stays exactly where it was. The raise rule is simple. Every time your income goes up, at least half of the increase goes directly into investments before the new pay level feels normal. Not after, before. The moment you receive confirmation of the raise, you log into your account and increase the contribution amount. You never experience the full raise as spending money. You spend half. You invest half. The lifestyle upgrade is real but partial. The contribution increase is automatic. Here is why this compound works so effectively. A 34-year-old contributing $500 a month who applies the raise rule consistently over 10 years, assuming 3% annual income growth and investing half of each raise, can expect their monthly contribution to reach somewhere between $800 and $900 by their mid-40s. They did not dramatically change their lifestyle. They did not feel deprived. They just refused to let every raise become entirely invisible. The third decision is treating income growth as an investment strategy. This is the one most financial content ignores, because it is harder to package into a neat formula. But in phase one, your income is the raw material everything else depends on. A higher income means larger contributions are possible without lifestyle sacrifice. It means you reach the threshold faster. It means the silent drains of fees and inflation represent a smaller percentage of a larger base. This does not mean taking on a second job out of obligation. It means being deliberate about the return on your time. A promotion that adds $15,000 a year to your salary, with half invested, adds $7,500 annually to your contribution engine. At 8% over 20 years, that single income event is worth roughly $340,000 in additional portfolio value. One career decision, $340,000. That is not a motivational framing. That is the math of phase one taken seriously. So those are the three decisions. Automate the contributions. Capture every raise before lifestyle does. Treat income growth as the most powerful investment available to you right now. Simple to understand. Genuinely hard to execute without intention. And once they are in place, what you will notice is that the question stops being whether compounding will work. The question becomes what it will feel like when it finally does. That shift, from grinding through phase one to watching phase two take over, is worth understanding before you arrive there. Here is what this all comes down to. The compounding chart is not lying to you. It is just showing you the end of a story without explaining the middle. The middle is where you are right now. And the middle has rules. Compounding needs a base before it can work. Fees and inflation quietly raise that base higher than the charts suggest. And in the years before you get there, you are the engine, not the market. You. That means the return rate is almost never the right thing to optimize in your 30s. The contribution rate is. The cost structure is. The income trajectory is. Those are the variables that actually move the threshold closer. So here is what to watch for. Every time you feel the urge to chase a better return, ask yourself first whether you have fully captured your last raise, whether your expense ratio is under 0.1%, whether your contributions move automatically or manually. Those three questions will tell you more about your trajectory than any market forecast. There is one thing compounding cannot solve on its own, though. It cannot protect you from making large, irreversible financial decisions based on incomplete information. That is a different problem entirely, and one worth understanding next. If this reframes how you think about the early years, share it with someone still trying to find the perfect stock. They are probably playing the wrong game.